Dr. Benny Wall, and welcome to our presentation today about time value of money, where we are going to be offering 2 hours of CE credit or PD credit and 2 additional hours on next Tuesday afternoon. Today we're going to talk about time value of money, and that is going to be the topic of today and next week's talk or presentation or whatever we might call it. Today we're going to spend most of the time on fundamentals, and then next week we're going to do applications. This week we're going to talk about how to do the formulas and so forth and so on, and how you might be able to grab the students' attention. And then next week we're going to talk about how they can apply to mortgages, bonds, stocks, credit cards, and other related issues where time value of money do come into play. Time value of money, in my opinion, is the one most important thing that you'll ever be exposed to. I believe it will impact your life for years and years to come, and I don't believe it, I know it, because you are going to have to deal with retirement. You're going to have to deal with buying a car, leasing a car. You're going to have to worry about sending your kids to school or paying for your daughter's wedding, or a variety of things where time value money comes into play. It is going to be an incredible force that you have to reckon with, whether you want to or not. So I really think that this is the most important thing that an undergraduate will ever be presented with. And I spend an incredible amount of time on this topic when I teach, whether it's finance, whether it's real estate, whether it's statistics, whether it's personal finance and economics. I spend an incredible amount of time on time value of money. So that's just, of course, what I feel to be very, very important. But anyway, I believe it to be the case, and I think you'll find it to be the case as well. So what is...
Sorry, can you put your mic on?
Okay, I'm getting some feedback here from my... Okay. All right, from my technical producer. And so hopefully if you're having some issues, we'll get them all sorted out before we get too far into today's lecture. So what is time value money? The very simple concept of time value money is that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. The most simplest excuse or reason that you will hear is that if you had $1 today, you could put it into a savings account and you could earn money. But also, what if the interest rate is 0, which is very, very close to what today's interest rates are, 0? What could you do with that dollar? Why would you rather have it today versus tomorrow? Well, you could consume it. Your consumption or your opportunity cost would come into play. If you had $1 today, you could buy a loaf of bread or a carton of eggs or whatever you chose to do with that dollar today, instead of having to wait until tomorrow to do whatever you wanted to do with that dollar. So $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, and that's this concept. What would you rather have today or tomorrow? Money, as you can see here, money received sooner rather than later allows us to use it for consumption purposes, and that's the example that I just gave you. If you had $1 today, you could go and buy a loaf of bread and a pack of bologna, and you could consume today, versus having to wait till tomorrow to go and buy that loaf of bread and pack of bologna in order to consume. Not having the opportunity to earn interest on your money is called opportunity cost. And that's really what you forgo, an opportunity cost. If you wait until tomorrow to get your dollar, or whatever the amount of money it might be, here we show $100, but regardless of what it is, when you have to wait to receive it, you are foregoing an opportunity cost. The opportunity could be consumption, or it could be interest, or it could be a variety of things. But you are foregoing an opportunity cost, and really that opportunity cost is going to be the amount of money that, or the rate of interest that you really decide what you need to earn on your money. For example, some people might be willing to pay zero in order to wait for to get their dollar tomorrow versus today. Some might say, you know, it's the same. But some people might say, I need 10%. Some might say I need 11%. Some might say I need 12%. So it's going to change as you, depending on the individual's, opportunity cost. Now, here is just a simple little graph that shows today we have $100, 1 year, what's it worth? Well, the formula for future value is simply what we have today, called present value, times 1 plus our interest rate to the nth power. Now, n is just going to be the number of periods. In our example here, n is going to be 1. So if we have $100, and if we earn interest of 10% for 1 year, you will see that at the end of 1 year, you have a future value of $110. So we had a principal of $100, that's what we put away today, and we earned a 10% rate of return compounded one time, compounded only once, and at the end of 1 year, we have now accumulated $110 total. 100 of that, if you'll recall, is the principal. 10 of it was interest. So that's a pretty big rate of return. We've got $100 here. Let me see if I can change colors. Yep. We've got $100 what we started with, but we've got 10 additional dollars that we earned in interest. So we earned 1/10 of our original investment by investing our principal with a bank or with someone else who wanted to borrow the money from us. We were lending and they were borrowing. Now, the future value of a current lump sum is the future value of a current lump sum, as I just showed you here, based on that example, would be $110 if it were a 10% rate of return. And what I want to show with this graphic here is that if I want to draw the analogy between present value and future value. You can see up top here, future value is equal to present value times 1 plus the interest rate to the nth power. And then down here, we're going to show you that present value is simply future value divided by 1 plus the interest rate to the nth power. Okay? And here, for example, if we assume a 10% rate of return and we are promised to get back $100 in 1 year, and we are going to earn a 10% rate of return, I believe that's going to be $90.91, but I want to check that. And that's a great thing about this this technology. We can just pull it up right here and say, let's see, plus $100 divided by 1.1 to the 1 power, but I don't need to put that in. So it is $90.91. Okay? Now I'm gonna show you here. I just very quickly typed in, and I'm just going to pull up that formula so you can see it. I just typed in 100 divided by 1.1, and you can see that that gives us the answer of 90.909090, etc. However, I could have also used a present value formula, and let me just quickly show you that. Present value, it's equal PV, stands for present value. Open parentheses, what is the rate? Well, the rate was 10%, so I'm going to put in 0.10, comma, number of periods. NPER means number of periods, and we've got 1 number of periods. The payment is going to be 0. It's only going to be 1 payment. And the future value was, what, $100. And I'm going to close that. And you can see here, that showed up negative. If we put a negative in, then you get a positive. You can see you get $90.91, and you can see you get $90.91 here. So we will look at some of the present value and future value formulas as we move forward, because they are very, very handy as we get into this. So here you can see, having $90.91 today, earning 10% will give me a rate of return of 10%, and at the end of 1 year, I will have $100. Up here, if I start with $100 and I am earning a 10% rate of return, at the end of 1 year, I will have $110. So I want you to spend a little bit of time and make sure you understand. And I'm sorry if I erased that too quick from you, but I want you to understand the difference between this future value and present value formula. Future value is simply what I have today, which is present value, times 1 plus some interest rate to the number of periods that we're going to compound it. That number of periods we'll get into a little bit later on. So what I have today, present value, 1 plus interest rate, or the rate of return, to the number of compounding periods. Now, when I come down below, present value, you just simply divide for the previous formula. Present value is future value divided by 1 plus the interest rate to the nth power. That was ugly, oh gosh. I'm sorry, I have to rewrite that, but 1 plus I to the nth power. So you can see, or at least I hope so, the differences or the similarities between the present value and the future value formula. They are really, really one and the same in so many aspects. Now, right now, all we're doing is simple compounding, meaning interest is paid one time per year. Now, taking it to the next level, what if you are receiving a payment more than one time per year? And this is the future value of an annuity. For example, let's say that grandma or grandpa every year give you $100 on your birthday. How much will you have at the end of 3 years, or something to that effect? And how much will you have at the end of 3 years? Or conversely, or similarly, I should say, what if you have $100 for the next 3 years? What would it be worth today? Now, obviously, both of these are going to depend on what kind of interest rate that you're going to have to earn. So what is going to be the rate of return or the opportunity cost that you are willing to incur in order to do that? Now, let's just take a look at these so you can understand what we're doing here. $100, let's just assume there's 0 today. At the end of 1 year, you get $100, and you have the opportunity to invest it for 1, 2 years. At the end of year 2, you get another $100. You have the opportunity to invest that for 1 year. And then at the end of year 3, you get an additional $100, but there's no additional opportunity to invest that. So you really are going to look at, I'm going to pull this 100 out, a future value of 100 times 1 plus, and I'm going to use a 10% interest rate, to the 1/2 power. This is going to be a future value of 100 times 1 plus 10% to the first power. And then the final one is also going to be future value, 100 to the 1 plus 0.1 to the 0 power. Now, this isn't statistics, but anything to the 0 power, that becomes 1. So we really end up getting, if I'm not mistaken, this first one is going to be 121, 110, and 100. Now let's just take a look at that. 1.1 to the second power, 1.1 to the first power, and then 1.1 to the 0 power. Let's take a look at that. Plus 100 times 1.1 squared, and it is $121. Then we have 100 times 1.1 to the first power, and that's 110. And then we have 100 times 1.1 to the 0 power, and that's $100. So we do get $331, I believe that is. So $331. So if we are going to receive $100 over the next 3 years from grandma or whomever for our birthday. This $100 that we get in year 1 ends up being worth $121 by the end of year 3. This 100 that we get in, let's clear this up a little bit. This 100 that we end up getting in the end of year 1 or the beginning of year 2 is going to be worth $110. And then this $100 that we receive at the very end is only going to be worth $100 because we don't have any additional time in which to invest that money. So $300 that were invested over 3 years would have a total future value of about $331 based on an interest rate or an opportunity cost, if you will, of 10%. Now, just drinking some water there, folks. Let's look at the future value of an annuity. This is a very similar problem, except this $100, we take it back 3 years. This $100, we take it back 2 years. And this $100, we take it back only 1 year. Because we've got to wait 1 year before we get the first 100. We've got to wait 2 years before we get the second. And then finally 3 years before we get the third $100. So what would be the present value of these amounts? Well, let's start with the first one here. We've got present value is going to be equal to future value over 1.1, and once again that's based on a 10% return, to the first power. I believe that is $90.91, but we'll check it. Year 2, you get present value is equal to $100 divided by 1.1 to the second power. And that's $82 or something, but we'll check it in a little bit. And then finally, this one, present value is equal to $100 divided by 1.1 to the third power. So now, once again, we'll talk about the financial calculator in a little bit, but for right now, I'm just going to use the Excel spreadsheet, which I believe is probably the most commonly used. The first one, we've got $100. We're going to divide it by 1.1, and that does give us that $90.91 we talked about. So $100 for 1 year. For 1 year is worth $90.91 today. $100 divided by 1.1 squared is going to be worth about $82.64 in today's money. And then finally, $100 divided by 1.1 to the third power is about $75. So we get $90, $82, and $75. And when we add those up, you get about $349. Let me see. About $348.69 is exactly what it is, or more accurately what it is. So what that suggests is that if I were willing to forego $48.69 today, That's saying if I wanted to loan this money to Danielle today, I would be willing to lend her 300, let's round it up and say 350. If she promised to pay me back $100 in year 1, $100 in year 2, and $100 in year 3. Now, that would assume that I was going to earn 10% return on my money. So if I loaned her $348 today, she would be willing to pay me $100. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Let me check this real. Oh, I knew something was wrong. That should not be E1. It should be E2. It's going to be $248. I knew something was a little bit crazy. Danielle ain't that slick. 248.68 or whatever it was. Let's call it 250. So I'd be willing to lend her 250 today if she would pay me back $100 over the next 3 years. If that were the case, if she paid me on time, then I would be earning a 10% rate of return on my money. Now later on we'll talk about what determines this rate of return. Well, for you and I as consumers, what determines our rate of return? It's our credit score. It's going to depend on what our Equifax or TransUnion or Experian credit scores are. For corporations, it depends on what their bond ratings are. But we'll talk about this more as we move forward. All right, I've already used these terms quite a bit. Present value, future value, payment, interest rate, and the number of periods. You're going to see these as we move forward and look at some calculator examples. Now, the calculator that I use for my classes here at Longwood, and also they're very common everywhere in academia, is going to be the BA2 Plus calculator. However, any calculator that has the financial functions are more than adequate to use for these time value money or present value calculations. Okay, now here is an example of the present value of a lump sum. We've already worked through this, but it's good to revisit the concept of time value money multiple times to help you learn it. You can see here $100. If I were to be willing to wait 1 year to receive $100, I would be willing to loan out $90.91 today, which would earn me a 10% rate of return. That opportunity cost would be 10%. Now, what if a 10% interest rate indicates that you're pretty risky in terms of today's environment. What if you're not so risky? Let's say that Danielle is very, very risky, not risky, risk averse, and she's very safe. So I'm only able to earn a 5% rate of return on her. So that means if she's going to pay me back $100 in 1 year, I would be willing to loan her $95.24 today. And the same song, third verse, somebody who's even less who's even less risky, they would only have to pay a 2% interest rate, but at the same time, I would be willing to loan them $98 and only get back $100 in 1 year. So it depends on what angle you're coming from. Here, I'm earning 10%, here 5%, here 2%. Okay? Now, this, I hope, will illustrate it better for you. You can see that the graph slopes downward, and anytime the interest rate is 0, doesn't matter how far out into the future you go, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, $100 is worth $100 all that time because there is no interest rate. But you can see as the interest rate goes up, as in the green graph, if you go out 5 years, well, if you go out 5 years, The present value of this $100 is about, oh, what is that, 70-some dollars? And you know what? I don't know what it is, but let's see. We know it's 5%. We know it's 5 years. We can figure that out pretty quick like. So if you've got $100 divided by 1.05 to the 5th power, it's going to be about $78.35. So you can see this is going to be about $78.35 at 5% for 3 years. Now you can see likewise when you drop down here to the 10% graph, I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but once again, we can figure that out by saying we've got 5 years at a 10% rate. So $100 divided by 1.1 to the 5th power, and that's about $62.09. So this is about $62.09. So to try to put that in perspective, if I had $62.09 that I could invest at a 10% rate of return for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, that should be close to $100. Similarly, if I had $78.35 that I could invest at a 5% rate of return for 5 years, then it should be worth $100. And of course, $100 invested at zero is worth $100. And that is assuming that there's no loss in consumption value. But and what I mean by that, that is assuming that there is no inflation. Obviously, if there's inflation, having $100 today and having to wait 5 years before you could spend it could be some serious consequences in terms of consumption. You know, take for example gasoline. Look at how volatile gasoline has been over the last several years. You can see that one day gas is $1.89, and then 3 months later it's $3.59. So that could have a huge impact on the cost of living or on your discretionary spending. Here is another here's another time value of money chart to sort of help you understand the time value of money. What this suggests is, let's just say, well, let's go back up here. I think this will help you understand this. Oh, no, it doesn't have 10% on it. I was going to draw the analogy to the one we just had. But 5%, if you've got a period of 5 years, which is I'm circling here, and it's a 5% rate of return, then $1 is worth about 78 cents today. And what that suggests is if you had 78 cents and you invested it at a 5% rate of return, at the end of 5 years, it should be worth $1. And let me see if we can do an example to help maybe make that a little clearer. So if we've got $1 divided by 1.05 to the 5th power, that is about 78 cents, and that's exactly what we have here, about 78 cents. So you can see if you have that same dollar that it was at 6%, it would be 74 cents. 7%, it would be 70 cents. At 8%, you would only be able to get about 68 cents per dollar. Okay? This is, if you take some time and work problems on your calculator and compare them to this, I think it will help you understand the how time value of money works. Okay, let's put together some examples and work a problem. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to communicate with Danielle on the software in which she has already got you all informed about. How much would you be willing to pay for an investment today based on some amount of money that you're going to get in the future? And it's how much would you pay for a stock or a car or anything based on what you think you're going to be able to sell it at some point in the future. It should depend on the riskiness. And once again, I've talked to you about that, or I've mentioned it at least, that it's going to depend on your creditworthiness. And for you and me, that would be our Equifax credit score probably. Or the certainty that you'll receive monies in the future. Let's look at an investment for $1,000 at the end of 3 years. Let's first compare the amount you'd be willing to pay if you required a 6% return. That's saying we're going to start today. Today is 0. Year 1, year 2, year 3. At the end of year 3, we're going to get $1,000. Now, if we had a 0 required return, what would we be willing to lend $1,000 for? How much would we be willing to lend in order to get $1,000 back? We'd be willing to lend the entire $1,000. However, there's no way we would be willing to forgo at least some opportunity cost. We would, even if it were the safest person in the world, if it were the Federal Reserve, you would still have opportunity cost involved because you could buy bread and bologna and other things with that money if you had it. So you're going to have some required return, and in this example we say it's going to be 6%. So really what we're going to do is take the present value of $1,000 divided by 1 plus I to the nth power. So it's going to be 1,000 divided by 1 plus 0.06, which is the interest rate, 6%, to the third power, which is going to be some number. I have no idea what it is. But we can come right over here and say plus 1,000 divided by 1.06, close parentheses, to the third power, and I get about $839.62. $839.62. Now, I want to just take a look at that. And remember, guys, this is going to be posted on a YouTube video, so you can pause it and go back and forth and watch it all you want. But I want to take a moment to back up and show you something. What was this? 6% for how many years? 3 years. 6% for 3 years. 6%, 3 years. This is where I'm going with this. Look. The present value factor of $1 for 3 years is 0.84. It's just rounding it up. And you can see that's what we've got here basically. 0.84 per dollar. If you take 0.84 times 1,000, you're going to get $840. But here, it's just, it's rounded out a little differently. So you can go back and see that the present value of $1 at 6% is 84 cents per dollar, and then you multiply it by the 1,000 that we use in this example, and you get $840, or, and that's rounded up, which is quite the same as the full answer of $839.62. Okay? Now, suppose the same example was offered to you, but you had a higher required return. In the previous example, you wanted a 6% return. Now, you are, for whatever reason, maybe it's a different environment, maybe the interest rates have gone up, maybe the economy is worse, so you now want a 10% required return instead of a 6%. So you've got the exact same example, except we are now going to require a 10% rate of return. 1,000 divided by 1.1 to the third power is going to give us some number. And before I even solve it, let's go back 2 screens and look at it. Oh, we don't have 10% on this screen, so we can't do that. I'm sorry. But now let's just pull up our spreadsheet and take plus 1,000 divided by 1.1 to the third power. Oh. $751.31. $751.31. So, just to once again get you to understand or help you understand, if you were willing to have a 6% return, you would pay $839 for this asset in return for receiving $1,000. If you paid $839 and at the end of 3 years you got $1,000, you would earn your required return of 6%. However, if you had a 10% required return, you would only be willing to loan $751 today in return for that $1,000 at the end of 3 years. So it's going to it's going to depend on your interest rate or your required return as to how much you're willing to loan or how much risk you're willing to accept. Obviously, as your required return goes up, the amount that you're willing to put out goes down. It's an inverse relationship between interest rate and the amount loaned. Now here it says, let's consider the value in these two differences. What is it? 839 and 751, just broadly speaking. This is based on 6%. This is based on 10%. Now, why are you willing to loan less, or why are you willing to loan more? Well, it's probably based on risk, the amount of risk that the lender has. If you have a risky lender, which would be illustrated by this higher interest rate, you are willing to loan them a less amount of money in return for a stated amount of return. The lower the risk goes, the higher the amount of money you're willing to pay them. Now, looking at the future value of a lump sum, and you've seen this already several times now. The future value is equal to present value times 1 plus I to the nth period. I just type it in so that you won't have a problem with my lovely handwriting. But you can see down here that $100 at a 10% rate for 1 year is worth $110. At a 5%, it's worth $105, and a 2%, it's $102. So the future value of a lump sum, just simple. We've gone through these. This is maybe an opportunity for you to pause the video and go back and make sure you have a good grasp on these. Here's another example of an annuity. An annuity is something that you're going to receive over time. And for most of you listening to this, the simplest example of an annuity would be your car payment or your house payment. It's the same amount of money that you're going to pay every single month over some period of time. It could be the amount of money that people are putting into a 529 account for their children to go to college. But anyway, I'm going to put the same amount of money in for some period of time, and I want to figure out what the value of the annuity is, whether the future value of an annuity, as this example points out, or the present value of an annuity. But here, you can, this example says you can determine how much your savings will be worth at some point in the future, say graduation from college, or a more long-term focus, such as retirement. So if you were to put $500 away in the first year, what would it be worth at the end of 5 years? Well, at the end of 5 years, according to this example, it would be worth $631. You know what? This is a good time to pause and say, well, how much, what kind of rate of return am I earning there? It doesn't really say. Well, you can look here. There's a couple ways we could solve it, but here, I'm sorry. Here, you can see $500 1 year into the future is going to be worth $530 into the future. So what would that interest rate imply? 6%, I believe. Wouldn't that be right? Let's look at that and see. So if we had $500 times 1.06, it would be $530. So you can see, you can infer that the interest rate here is 6% every year. So $500 invested for 1, 2, 3, 4 years would be worth $631 at the end of 4 years. $500 invested for 1, 2, 3 years would be worth $595.50. $500 invested for 1, 2 years would be worth $562. $500 invested for 1 year, we just talked about, would be worth $530. And $500 invested in the 5th year with no opportunity for growth would be worth $500. So when you sum up these values along this right-hand side, it assumes that $500 invested in each of the next 5 years would be worth $2,818.50. So this could be a very good example of whether your parents or grandparents or somebody might be willing to put $500 away each year while you were in college. At the end, you would have $2,818.50. Here's another example. We'll work through it so that you can have a better understanding of it. It does tell us that it's going to be at 8% compounded annually. How much will it be worth at the end of 3 years? Well, you can see here, this $100 for 1 year, it's easy. It's $108, which is simply 100 times 1.08. This one is going to be 100 times 1.08 squared. And this is simply 1.08 to the 0 power, which is just simply $100. So you can see $100 invested over the next 3 years at an 8% interest rate compounded annually would be worth about $325 at the end of the 3rd year. Now, once again, we've already looked at some of these, but the future value, the present value of an annuity, $100 over the next 2 years, 100 divided by 1.1, 100 divided by 1.1 squared. You can see that 100 divided by 1.1, $90.91. 100 divided by 1.1 squared is $82.64. So what that suggests, if I had $90.91, I could invest it at a 10% rate of return, and at the end of 1 year, it would be worth $100. Similarly, if I had $82.64, I could invest it for 2 years at a 10% return, and I would end up with $100 at the end of 2 years. Here is an example of a present value of an annuity, $500 over the next 5 years, and you can see $500 discounted back for 1 year, $471, $500 discounted back for 2 years, $445, $500 discounted back for 3 is $420, 4 years, $396, 5 years, $373. So if I were going to receive as an investment over the next 5 years, $500 each year, I would be willing to loan out $2,106 today in order for this rate of return of $500 over the next 5 years. Now, let's change gears a little bit. So far, we've always talked about annual interest. Interest paid one time per year, simple interest, if you will. Only paid once. We're going to switch gears because all of us, whether we like it or not, credit cards, mortgages, car payments are all not simple interest. Most of all of those are compound interest, and you, as an investor, would like to also not have simple interest. You would rather have compound interest. You want interest paid on top of interest, and that's what this example here is going to start to illustrate. At least I hope it will. You can see here in this example that if we start with the example that we started with earlier, $100 today over 1 year, except we're going to compound the interest twice. 10% is still going to be the rate. And when we did it, well, simple interest, $100 for 1 year gave us $110 at the end of 1 year. But now we're going to assume that the interest is compounded semi-annually. What does semi-annually mean? Semi-annually means that it's paid twice per year. So we're going to get interest on the first half of the year, and then we're going to earn interest on the second part of the year. So here, if we have $100 when we start at time 0 today, what is our interest rate going to be for the first 6 months? It's just going to be simply the 10% divided by 2, which is 5%. It's that, no rocket science there. You just take the annual rate divided by 2, and you get that 5% rate of return. So what is my return going to be at the end? It's going to be simply 100 times 1 plus the interest rate, which is 5%. Now look at that. All that is future value is equal to present value times 1 plus I. That's all that is. So 100 times 1.05 at the end of 6 months, let's just assume we started on January 1, so that the end of June 30th, we have $105. So now we have $105. They can't ever take that away from us. Okay? So we have principal now of $105. How much of it was principal to begin with? $100. That's what we started with. How much of that is interest? $5 of it is interest in that first 6 months. Now, in the second 6 months, we are going to once again take our principal, which is now $105, and we're going to multiply it by 1.05, which is 1 plus I, and that's going to give us the 110.25. Now, folks, I know many of you are teachers that are listening to this, and you look at this example and you say, oh, it's 0.25 cents, it's nothing. Well, when you multiply this by 1,000 or 100,000 or $1 million, this comes out to be a whole bunch of money. And that's the kind of, think of Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whomever, they have millions and millions and millions of dollars, so this makes a huge difference to them. Would they rather pay 110 or would they rather pay 110.25? I can assure you they would rather pay 110 on the millions and millions of dollars that are in their account. So, and you'll see as the compounding periods increase, this amount gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So the general gist of it is, though, if you're loaning money, you want interest paid as often as possible. If you're borrowing money, you want interest paid as fewest times as possible. So you would like to have simple interest if you're borrowing money, and you would like to have compound interest if you're loaning money. And when I say loaning money, that means you've got a savings account with Bank of America, or you've got a CD with Wells Fargo, or whatever the case might be. So here, why is this 1.1 different than this $110.25 different than the $110? It's because we earned interest on interest. And that's what compounding is that's what the beauty of compounding is all about. You earn interest on top of interest. Excuse me. Now, same song, another verse. We're going to take the same exact example, $100 or $1, whatever we're talking about. It's going to earn 10% annually, except now we're going to assume that it's compounded quarterly. That means it's compounded 4 times a year. Once at the end of 3 months, once at the end of 6 months, once at the end of 9 months, and then finally once at the end of 12 months, which is 1 year. So in the previous example, 10%, so you're going to have 10% divided by, let me not write that right there, but you're going to have 10% divided by 4, so you're going to have 2.5% each quarter. So at the end of 3 months, you will have earned 2.5%. And then at the end of 6 months, you will earn, and let's take this, I'm going to break this down, and let's go to the next level. We're going to assume $100 to make that example easier. 100 times 1.025 will give us 102.50. Am I right? I think I'm right. And then we earn 1.10250 times 1.025. So at the end of 6 months, we have $105.06. Then at the end of the 9 months, we have the 105.06 times 1.025. We have 107.69. And then at the end of 1 year, we get the 107.69 times 1.025. We get $110.38. Now, once again, when it is annual at 10%, well, we get a 10% return, whatever it is. When it's semi-annual at 10%, we get a 10.25% return. When it is quarterly at 10%, this example we just did, we get a 10.38% return. So you can see, if you're looking at this, is that you go from a 10% to a 10.25% return. That's 25 basis points. That is a lot of money for anybody in any environment, whether it's Bank of America or whether it's Warren Buffett or whether it's Benny Waller on his savings account. Obviously, I'd never be able to get that kind of money on my savings account, but you get 25 basis points higher. And then when you go to quarterly, you get another 13 basis points additional on top of the 10.25% that you previously earned. So compounding really, now I want you to take a moment to soak this in and say this is a great way to earn money, but I also want you to recognize that when you're paying a credit card, it's a great way to give away a lot of money. So it's a give and take, okay? So if you were paying 18% return on your credit card that was compounded annually, you'd only pay 18%. But if you're paying 18% that's compounded monthly, which is what you are doing, you're probably ended up paying about 19.56% if my math, if my recall of my math is any good there. So now here is another illustration of the beauty of compound interest. Over a 6% over a period of time of 10 years, you can see here. The original $100 never changes. The $100 stays the same at the bottom there, but you can see interest that you earn on the original $100. Look at that triangle. That is what is so, that is really, really the beauty of compounding by leaving it in a period of time. And you can see it's also beautiful here. Look at the amount of interest you earn on interest. Quite a bit. And you're going to see a graph coming up here in just a little bit that really, really does drive home this idea of compound interest. I need to take about a 2-minute break here to let my voice catch up, and we'll be 2 minutes or 5 minutes? Let's do 5 minutes, and I'll be right back, okay? Now, welcome back. This is the example that I was referencing right before we took a break in terms of the power of compounding. You know, this really does. I've shown this example literally hundreds of times as I've taught finance, real estate, personal finance, economics. And it always gives me a little chill when I put this up. You can see here you've got two investors, Sally and Ed. Sally and Ed both are going to invest $3,000 for a certain period of time. You can see Sally starts right after, let's say, graduation. She starts when she's 22. That's this column here in the middle. Sally puts away $3,000 at the end of each year for 10 years. So she goes down to 32. That means she puts away $30,000. 3 times 10 is $30,000. And then Sally, for whatever reason, does not invest any more until she's 65. She never invests anymore. But at the age of 65, she has accumulated $1.343 million based on the $30,000 that she invested. Now, this does assume a 6% return, which is not that much. So 6% over, what is that, 38 years it looks like here. 38 years will have accumulated $1.3 million for Sally at the end of age 65. Whereas Ed did not start investing anything until, looks like he was about 28. And he invested it for the remainder of his life. So he took $30,000 for 38 years, which if you were to do the math, it would be, let's see, $114,000. Ed invested $114,000, and at retirement he would have about $1.092 million. So Ed would have about 1.1 million, but Sally had 1.3 million. Sally only invested 30,000. Ed invested 114,000. This really, really does drive home the concept of compounding, time value of money. $30,000 earned $1.3 million. 114,000 earned $1.1 million. But it's just, it's when Sally did it. She did it early. So if you educators, or if you young people, if you can really, really, really try to drive home the importance of saving early, even if it's a little bit, even a little teeny tiny bit, it will really, really make a difference in your livelihood as you get older. It's incredibly important. And I think this illustrates it better than any example I've ever seen. It really does. Now, you know, obviously we could go to a spreadsheet and we could look at how much would this be worth if Sally had continued to do it. Let's just do that. Jesus, that's what we're here for. $22, $23, what did it go to? $65, Danielle? Huh?
This chart makes me sad.
Make you sad because you hadn't put away enough yet? Danielle said this makes her sad because you hadn't put away enough yet. But you know what? The thing of it is, Danielle's a young spring chicken. She could still do this. And I'm going to just put in a future value here. All this is going to be this amount times 1.06. Let me make sure I'm right. Wait a minute. Okay, we got a problem here. What's that problem? It says 6% at the top of the, but it's 10%. This is a mistake. It's 10%, not 6%. Okay. Okay, now I don't know if I can. I'm just putting together a little, this is going to be 3,000 every year for that many years. And now we're going to say, oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't carry it with me. I need to say 6390. This plus that times now, let's just assume my math is right. If Sally had continued putting away $3,000 until she was 65, she would have ended up with $2.15 million. So, she ended up with 1.3 anyway. I erased it. But yeah, 1.3 anyway, but she could have put away another $1 million that she continued to save. So the time value of money, this really, really does illustrate it. And I've got a daughter, and I try so hard to get her to think about saving a little bit today, because down the road, it gets tougher and tougher to save. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But if you make it a habit, I mean, good habits and bad habits are all learned. So if you can make it a habit, I think it will pay off down the road for you as well as your students alike. Here's the rule of 72. I don't really utilize this rule a lot, although it's somewhat helpful. Excuse me, I just told Danielle I shouldn't have taken my daughter to Chick-fil-A when we got out of school today, because it's, well, now you can tell what it's doing to me. But anyway, the rule of 72 is how long does it take your money to double? And it really is the number of years for a given sum to double, dividing the investment growth or interest rate into 72. For example, if your annual return is 9%, it would take 72 divided by 9, or approximately 8 years for your money to double if you are earning a 9% rate of return. And that is, you know, once again, I don't really talk about this a lot in my classes, but it is a rule that in the financial literacy material that they do talk about quite a bit, so I just take the time to include it here. Now, a little bit, I want to take a little bit of time here. Well, actually, I'm not going to take too much time at all. Talk about the calculator, because many of you students, particularly high school students, they don't have these financial calculators, but they do have these graphic calculators, which do allow for financial functions. And now you can use your iPhone or your iPad or so many things to calculate time value of money functions. But anyway, this course is taught with the BA2 Plus, or the course here at Longwood, I should say, is taught with the BA2 Plus, which is a financial calculator, and it has the 5 financial functions. N is the number of periods that you're going to finance something, the annual interest rate or the periodic rate, the current present value, the current amount or payment, whether it's a savings amount or whether it's a mortgage or car payment, and some future value amount. Here's an example of the BA2 Plus, and you can see the present value, the future value key, the number of periods, so forth and so on. As I've said previously, this is going to be posted online, hopefully within about 24 hours or so. Okay, and you'll be able to pause this and go back and look at it. So I'm not going to spend an incredible amount of time on going over the calculator, because I know that quite a few of you won't use this calculator in your illustrations, but the concept, the concept's always the same. Now here, once again, it's just showing you the calculator, the cash flow keys, and the financial keys. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over this either. Here I will just real quickly work a problem with you. For example, if you were to have, it doesn't matter what order you put these financial keys in. Does not matter. However, I always encourage my students to either put the one you're solving for at the top or at the bottom. It makes it much easier to reference, because sometimes you could have a 2 or even a 3-part question that you would have to refer back to. But let's just say we had $100 and we were going to finance it for 10% divided by 2, so it's going to be financed at it's semi-annual compounding, 2 periods. You should find, when you compute your future value, the answer to be $110.25, which is identical to what we worked out if you when we worked it out earlier. For example, now I do want to say, let me just briefly go through this. If you were going to plug this information in, it doesn't matter what you do as long as this one is the last thing you do. For example, you could type in 0, hit PMT, then type in 5, hit I/Y, which is the interest rate. Type in 2, hit N for the number of periods, type 100, hit PV for the present value, and then you would go up top here and you would type in your CPT key, which means compute, up in the upper left corner, CPT, and then you would hit future value, and it should give you $110.25 as your answer, which is, as I said, the exact answer you should have gotten from when we did 100 times 1.05 to the second power. All right, suppose that a firm is offered an investment, expect to return $1,000 at the end of 3 years. How much would you be willing to pay for this example? Now, I'm going to just quickly, this is going to be a present value. It's going to be equal to future value divided by 1 plus I to the n power, which is going to be 1,000 divided by 1.06, 1 plus 0.06, to the third power, which is going to give us 1,000 divided by 1.06 y to the third, 839.62, which I believe we had solved before. Okay? So this is the way you would solve it longhand. Your calculator version would be this. N would be 3, 6 would be I/Y, future value would be 1,000, payment 0, compute present value, and you get $840. Actually, you would get $839 and what was it, 62 cents. And you can see, here's the formula again, the financial formula solution. Okay? Present value of an annuity. If you were to win a lottery worth $1 million to be paid over the next 20 years, that would be $50,000 per year. Assuming a discount rate of 20%, what would that $1 million be worth today? Well, this is going to be the present value of an annuity, and we do have a formula for it, and I'll show it to you on the next page right here. But basically, I want you to see what this is. This is $50,000 discounted for 1 year is worth $41,000. 50 discounted for 2 years, $34,000. For 3 years, $28,000. And for that last $50,000 that you get in 20 years, it's just worth a little over $1,300. So how much would you be willing to take if you were willing to take a lump sum based on a 20% discount rate? For $1 million, you'd be willing to take $243,000 in exchange for $1 million. Now, folks, I know that if you win the lottery, you're like, oh my God, $240,000 is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but you know what? If you won the lottery, Wells Fargo would make you a loan for 7% interest. I mean, for heaven's sake, you don't have to deal with all of this, it's my money, I want it now. What is that, J.G. Wentworth crap? You know, that is the stuff that you need to stay away from. It is for the hopeless, the people that are just down and out on their luck. Don't do it. Don't do it unless, you've exhausted everything else. And here's the formula for that, should you need to teach it. I don't even teach this formula anymore in my classes. I illustrate it to them and show it to them. But if you walk through it, this is the cash flow of $50,000. This represents the interest rate and the number of years. And you get the exact same number whether you work it longhand or whether you work it using a calculator. But that's saying you'd be willing to forego that $50,000 a year for the next 20 years for $243,000 today, which is, it's a tough pill to swallow for me. All right, and this is the calculator formula. N is 20, I/Y is 20. Now, this is 20%. I said recall, I really hadn't told you, but the calculator takes anything that you put in and it divides by 100 for interest. So if you put in 20, it's really 0.20. If you put in 5, it's really 0.05. If you put in 19, it's really 0.19, okay? So that's the calculator. This calculator converts everything to a percent for you. So 20 is 20%. Future value is 0. The payment to received over the next 20 years is $50,000. How much is that worth in today's dollars? $244,000 approximately. Now the same song, just another verse. What happens if you can have an opportunity cost of only 15%? That means J.G. Wentworth does not charge you 20%, they only charge you 15%. Well, instead of getting $243,000, you get $312,000. But you better believe that J.G. Wentworth or anybody else is going to want this rate to be as high as they possibly can get it. And it is only going to be people that are generally desperate that deal with these kinds of folks because of these exuberant rates that they charge. I mean, they are one step away from being a payday lender. They take advantage of people that have gone through a divorce or that have they might have an estate or a will or something where they're getting some money on a regular basis. And, they just don't want to wait for the money. And people are down on their luck or just had some rotten luck. That's what these folks take advantage of. And that's for what it's worth. I'm here to teach finance, though, not give lectures in life. So I'll go on about that. The future value of a lump sum. If you're financially prudent, you would prefer $100 today because you could invest it in the savings account or it would grow much greater than the original value. Here's the example. We've already gone through this. I'm not going to just continue to go through this, but 10% one time per year. At the end of the year, you'd have $110. The formula for it, I've already gone through that as well. Not going to belabor that, but it's present value times 1 plus the rate times the number of periods. And the calculator example is here. Once again, you will have access to the video. You pause it and go through it. And of course, I don't know, I probably didn't say this, but anytime any of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Danielle and I, and we'll be more than happy to help you with these problems or the questions that you might have. Remember, we're doing this in hopes that you're going to promote our personal finance and economics course. So we are more than happy to help you with any of these issues that you have. And if you have questions about a calculator or using Excel or a spreadsheet, we'd be more than happy to help you with those. Here, once again, we've already worked an example very similar to this. I wrote it out, but here it is and graphically displayed. You can see, as I showed you earlier, if it's compounded 4 times per year, $100 will end up being $110.38 versus $110 if it was compounded once, $110.25 if it was compounded twice, and $110.38 if it was compounded quarterly. But, you know, one of the things that I think this shows you is it shows you how much you have, it shows you the principal amount, and then it shows you the amount of interest that you earn. Same as here. Look how much interest you earn. Look how much interest you earn. Look how much interest you earn. So you're earning interest on top of interest, and this illustrates that pretty nicely. Am I going the wrong way? I am. Future value formula I just showed you there. Here it is, the calculator solution again. Future value and annuity would be the case of birthday. Your parents deposited $100 into a savings account, and we worked one of these and we talked about it. Well, this is probably a similar example. $100 for 2 years will be worth $117 at the end of 2 years. $100 for 1 year, $108. $100 for 0 years, $100. That's assuming an 8% rate of return. $100 invested over 3 years would be worth $325 at the end of 3 years, earning an 8% annual compound rate. This is that formula. Once again, I don't really teach this in my classes, but this is the formula for the future value of an annuity, because the calculators are just so, I know we've become a bit dependent on calculators. Sometimes when I say, what's 100 times 2, and people have to grab a calculator to do it. But this is an example, I think, that calculators do come in nice and handy for these financial valuations. This is the financial calculator formula. And you know what, we're getting close to the end here, because this is, the effective interest rates. And this is something that it's going to parlay us right into next time, where we talk about mortgages, stocks, bonds, and all of these present value things that come into play. What is an effective rate? Well, you know what an effective rate is. In the first example that I gave you, $100 at 10% annually, the effective rate is 10% because it's just $110. But $100 at 10% semi-annually is going to be 10.25%. And I'll show you how to calculate this, but you really know already. And then $100 at 10% quarterly is 10.38%. So the effective rate grows as the number of compounding periods grow. And the effective rate that you pay on your credit card grows as the compounding periods grow. And let's look at that example. Here, let me just give you an example here. To calculate effective rate, you can simply solve for future value if you assume present value is $1, N is going to be the number of periods. And let's just start with the very simple one period at 10% and 0 payments. You're going to get this, you're going to get 1.1. So what's the effective rate? The effective rate is 0.10 or 10%. If you take the exact same problem, but now we turn it into quarterly compounding, payment is 0 still, you're going to get 1.1038. Now, the effective rate is 0.1038 or 10.38%. Whatever's to the right of the decimal is the effective rate, okay? Whatever's to the right of the decimal is the effective rate. Here is an example on the calculator. Let's see, 5% annually. Oh, interest is compounded on a monthly basis. What is the effective rate? You can see N is 12 because it's the number of compounding periods. I/Y is this number, but all it is 5 divided by 12. 5% is the annual rate divided by the number of periods. In this case, we did it monthly, so it would be 5 divided by 12. Present value is $1. Payment is 0. And when you solve for future value, you get 1.0511, blah, blah, blah. So what is the effective rate? 5.1162%, or 0.051162. So the effective rate and the nominal rate are the same when, if and only what is true. If and only if the number of compounding periods is 1. Effective rate and nominal rate are the same if compounding is only 1 time per year. Otherwise, effective rate will always be greater than the nominal rate. Okay? Now here is an example. I think I already alluded to this example. What if your credit card is compounded on a monthly rate and it's an 18% interest rate, 18 divided by 12, I believe that's 1.5, if I'm not mistaken. 12 is the number of periods. When you compute future value, I think it is 1.1956. I believe. And of course it is. The effective rate is 19.56%. So what I want you to take away from that is when you pay your credit card, and most people, I mean, credit card rates are going up again. The economy is starting to flounder, and folks are really starting to use credit once again. And that's even if you do have a credit card at 18%, you're probably paying close to 20% if you have a balance on it. So you're probably paying close to 20% on that credit card if you are carrying a balance on it. If you're not carrying a balance on it, it doesn't really matter what the rate is because it gets paid off every month and it's a great interest-free loan. But if you are carrying a balance, you need to be aware of the effective rate that you're probably paying on that card. Now, something that maybe we'll get a chance to look at next time as well as effective rates come into play quite often when you're buying a home. Many times the mortgage lender will quote you a really low interest rate, but by the time they put all the discount points and the appraisal and this and that and the other, your effective rate can be probably 150 basis points higher or 1.5% higher than you really thought it would be because of all of those things that, and you know, you made the decision. You could say, no, I don't want to finance that stuff. And it's crazy to finance that stuff. But when you take a $300 administrative fee and finance it for 30 years, you end up paying like $800 for it instead of $300 for it. So you need to keep those things in mind. And what I want you to also, we'll talk more about it maybe next time, but try to illustrate to your students. And I want you to also, as students yourself, take notice. Do you realize how much a Whopper Jr. and a fry will cost you if you put it on a credit card and don't pay it off? I mean, a Whopper fry a Whopper Jr. and a fry and a soft drink could cost you $75, $80, $100 if you put it on a credit card and leave it on there for any period of time. And that's just ludicrous. I love a Whopper Jr. as well as the next guy, but I ain't never had one worth $75. Have you, Danielle?
No.
Heck no. Here's the formula for the payment, amortization for payment. And this is the, to calculate it for the, using the calculator. Let's see, $100,000 over 30 years. But why are we going to do it 30 times 12, Danielle? Why? Because we pay it monthly, that's right. 6 divided by 12 because we pay it monthly, although this 360 should go down here, not up there. Future value is going to be 0 up there. And when we solve for payment, let's see, 6%, 30 years. Let's go over here and use a payment, PMT, rate, 0.06 divided by 12, is that right? Number of periods, 360. Present value was 100,000. Future value is 0. $599.55. So if you were to buy a $100,000 home and finance it for 30 years at a 6% rate with monthly amortization, it would cost you right at $600 a month for 30 years or 360 months. All right, the very last thing here is perpetuity in terms of time value of money. And time value of money, when you look at a perpetuity, it's something that's going to go on forever and ever and ever. The present value of a perpetuity is just simply the amount of cash divided by the interest rate. For example, if you wanted to, let's say that you wanted to, you wanted to leave Longwood an amount of money where they could give a scholarship out forever and ever and ever, how much would you need to leave them? Let's say you wanted to leave them a $10,000 a year scholarship. Well, I can tell you right now, Longwood uses a 4% cap rate or 4% interest rate. So how much would you need to leave? Is that $250,000? I don't know. I can't do my math very well, but let's do 10,000 divided by 0.04, 250,000. 250. So you would need to leave 250,000 to the endowment at Longwood in order to leave a $10,000 scholarship every year for the rest of eternity. So a perpetuity is what's the payment going to be, and this rate assumes that Longwood's going to be able to earn at least 4% on that. Some years they might earn more, some years they might earn less, but on average they should be able to earn. Because if you take 4% and multiply it by $250,000, you get $10,000. And that's what, so the logic between a perpetuity or behind a perpetuity is that you're only going to use the interest off of the principal amount. You're never ever going to get into the principal. It's only going to be the interest that is paid. Okay? Here is another example. If you wanted to give 5,000 divided by 0.04, what is that? 100,000? 125,000. So 125,000 is what you would need to leave in order to provide a $5,000 scholarship on an annual basis for perpetuity. So, okay, that's sort of like the nuts and bolts of time value of money. Like I said earlier, when we started, in case you came in late, is that my plan is to give you sort of the nuts and bolts this time, and then next week we will go into applications. We'll look at mortgages, car payments, stocks and bonds, and anyway, applications of how time value of money really comes into play in everyday life. I mean, today we use some simple examples about savings and grandma leaving this and so forth. But next time, next Tuesday, same time, right? Next Tuesday, same time, we're going to dig this in a little deeper and do some actual examples. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to myself or Danielle. My email is wallerbd@longwood. And also, I want to once again plug our Econ and Personal Finance, which is at cfr.longwood.edu. And I know my handwriting is atrocious. But we are taking registrations for that now, and we are expecting this to be the biggest year yet. This is our 4th year of doing this, and it's grown exponentially every year. So we hope some of you out there will recommend this to some of your students. Remember, I'm going to do a shameless plug. No, I'm not. I'm doing this for you for free, so it's not shameless. If you take the course, it's $400, but it's a Longwood course. It's taught by myself and Dr. Scott Wentland, both are full professors in finance and economics. If you take the course and get a C or better and then come to Longwood, we will give you an additional 3 credit-hour scholarship. So if you take this course and come to Longwood, for $400, you'll get about a $2,500 value. So for those of you who are taking this course just to make better financial decisions, if you know students who are going to come to Longwood, it would be worth it for them to repeat Econ and Personal Finance, even if they had this course at, say, Prince Edward or Amelia, wherever they might be, wherever you might be listening to this. It would behoove them to repeat it for $400 if they knew they were coming to Longwood, because it's a really, really good deal. And also, it's going to look really nice to have a Longwood transcript. This is not a community college transcript, but a Longwood transcript when you are applying for colleges, whether or not it's Longwood or wherever. And yes, this course will transfer to wherever you are going to go to school, whether it's UVA or University of Richmond or Wake Forest. This course should transfer, the Econ and Personal Finance course should transfer without any issues. So if you have questions, please reach out to myself or Danielle Hennessy. And with questions, we are, as I said, we are in the current process of registration. And if nothing else, I'll see you back here next week at the same time, 3:45. Have a great week.